Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. Let me just double check my audio here. Give me 1 second. All right, we got a lot of good mornings this morning. Let me just check. All right, sounds like I'm good to go. All right, we are ready to go. We are ready to rock and roll. We got a jam-packed Saturday morning embroidery class today. So on the left-hand side, okay, I got a new little tool right here. So this is a photo box that I'll actually, anytime I'm kind of showcasing something, I'm going to use the light box. It's actually a pretty big one, and we're gonna try it out. I just bought it this week, so we're gonna test it out. We're gonna try it out, and then maybe next week or the week after, I'm gonna run uh, a full kind of test on it on the light box, and then I'll do a review on this test box. All right, but it's pretty big. You're gonna see my hoop, my mighty hoop actually fits inside, so I can do all the demonstration. Okay, inside the light box, so it's very convenient as of right now. All right, so actually I have a camera inside. All right, this is my camera inside that light box. All right, this is the freestyle hoop. Okay, so for those who are familiar with the mighty hoop freestyle hoop, then you know it's a little bigger than the normal one, or a little longer than the normal one. So this fits easily in there. So I could do my demonstrations. All right, because sometimes it looks a little dark in the room. All right, this way I don't have to set up any special lights or anything. I'm doing my demonstration here. All right, so oops. All right, so that's that right there. We'll kind of see a little bit once we get into it. But let me um, let me turn off this camera real quick. All right. So yeah. So as you can see here, now I could do my demonstrations right here. Right. It's a lot of space right here. So as you can see, this is the big. This is the 4.25 mitre hoop, and it fits inside with no problem. All right. So I think it's very convenient to do all these demonstrations. All right. Let me switch over cameras. All right. So we can start. All right, let me turn these off just so we don't waste these batteries. Okay, so we are now officially, right, in beanie season. Okay, give me 1 sec. Let me change this camera real quick. All right, all right, let's see. Actually, let's go with this one. Okay. All right, we are officially, all right, even though I know it's warm, I know it's super hot on the West Coast, it's still kind of warmish here, Midwest, uh, North Illinois area. All right, it's still kind of warm. So even though it's warm, okay, we're not really thinking about the coldness, but I guarantee you, okay, I guarantee you, in a couple weeks from now, it's going to be cold and people are going to be ordering beanies left and right. All right. It happens every year. All right. So good thing about beanies, the reason why I like beanies, okay, actually got my beanies right here. All right. Reason why I like beanies, first of all, right? Well, not first of all, but there's so many reasons, all right? I probably got like 100 reasons why I like beanies. All right. As you can see, they're easy to ship, right? Like if you need to ship these, right? It's easy to bag them, put them in a little mailer. Okay. You don't have to box them up. All right. Good thing about them that I like about these, right? By the time you fold them and everything, all right, you're only really embroidering on a little space right here. Okay. So you're not doing big, giant, crazy designs. All right. So another big reason why I like it because they're flat. Okay. Anytime you're embroidering on anything flat, easy day. All right. Easy day. And in a bit, I'm going to show you all about the hooping. All right. So embroidery is always consists of three three foundations. So it's the digitizing. So I want to talk about the digitizing, some do's and don'ts when we're talking about beanies. All right. Once we have our files set, ready to go, the number two is hooping. Okay, hooping. There's the easy way. There's the more complicated way. All right. I'm all about doing it the easy way. All right. So talking about hooping. All right. Hey, good morning, T-Town. All right. Not a fan of the freestyle with pre-cut backing. They don't clip in very well in the top. Yeah. All right. I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay. I know exactly what you're talking about. We'll talk about that too when we talk about that. Um, Sometimes you can either go bigger, you can either make it a little bigger, or I kind of a way around that one. But you are right. I know what you're talking about, so we'll talk about that. All right. All right. We got a lot of good mornings. All right. Good morning, Legene. Salty Gravy. Linda from California. Salty Gravy, Wisconsin. Legene, Western Wisconsin. All right. So for those who are Midwest, right, you already know. All right. This is going to be my fourth winter here in Midwest. All right. It's my last winter here. Uh, I'm already more than ready for this cold. All right. So I already know the cold that's about to come. All right, Barb, good morning, North Central, Minnesota. Currently 49 degrees. Oh, wow. All right. So it's already getting down there. Okay. It's pretty cool right now. I have the window open right here, so getting that fresh breeze right now. All right, Alicia, good morning. T-Towns from Toledo, Ohio. Kim from Kentucky, good morning. All right, Badge Underground from the Barbados. All right, from the islands. Classy and caffeinated from North Carolina. All right, good morning. We got Brett from Western Australia. All right, Perth, Western Australia. All right, we got Sammer from Philly. Soulmate, good morning. All right, let me X this guy out here. I don't need Corel. All right, Marisa, Southern California. Michael, Carolyn from North Carolina. All right, all right, all right. Let's get busy. All right, first, let's start with some stuff. All right, let's take a quick field trip. Let's go to my website that I buy my beanies at. All right, where am I? Yeah, right here. All right, so let's just start with product. All right, first thing when we're dealing with this stuff, when we're dealing with beanies. All right, this is where I buy my beanies. All right, SNS Activewear. If you do not have an account here, all right, I highly recommend getting an account here. Very convenient. Has pretty much all the popular brands here. But what I like to do, okay, what I like to do, I like to go down to categories, and then we'll start with beanies. All right, so here it has it categorized from price high to low. All right, so if you got some bougie customers that want some of that good stuff, all right, you can get beanies at 40 bucks, right? Or the branded, the Columbia. All right, the only thing with the branded stuff like the Columbia, you already have the logo here. So you would have to kind of make the personalize it like on the sides or on the back. All right. So you got that. All right. Uh, Here, the more expensive type is also like the more plush type. So this one here, chunky rib. So like you could see it here. We could zoom in. You can see the thickness on this, right? This is like real good quality stuff. All right. There are customers that are looking for this. All right. So this type of beanie, right? It's not very common, but every now and then you'll have somebody looking for some very, very uh, upscale type-ish beanies. All right. So, all right. Usually, if I have a customer that really doesn't know exactly what they want, or they don't want to choose from the stuff that we have, right? I'll send them to this site, and as you can see, this is without logging in, so customers never see the actual price, and if they do, they'll see the retail price, right? For example, here, okay, so here when we're looking at the price, they're seeing at the starting at price. So this is retail price, and then when you create an account, you'll see the actual vendor account. Okay. All right, now you can also categorize this by best sellers. All right, so these are the most popular ones. All right, this is the one that I order. I like getting these here, the Yupoong. So Yupoong is like the same company as FlexFit. All right, so very good stuff. And when I started with beanies, okay, what I did, I bought like all of these beanies, like all the ones that I thought were pretty nice. I bought them all. I even bought this one, the Sportsman. Okay, if you look at the Sportsman, if you go from uh, low to high, you'll see that the Sportsman is actually like on the bottom of the price. All right, so I bought these. I'm not a big fan of the Sportsman because they're a little thinner. Okay, right. You can probably tell kind of with the picture here. Okay, a little thinner here. All right, but so I'm not a big fan of Sportsman. I've gone Sportsman when certain colors aren't available in the Yupon, and I had to come here, and I wasn't a big fan of it. But these are the ones that I get, the 1501 KC. All right, yeah, right here. So they have all these colors here. So another thing that the customers don't see, if you do send them to a site like this, they don't see the quantity. Okay, so that would be your job to kind of see what colors are available. But usually when you order, you kind of have an idea what's the popular colors, which colors are available. Okay, and for the most part right now, the colors are available. Okay, I know last year it was hard to get color black, but as of right now, all right, black is they're in full stock right now with black. All right, all right. So just want to give you an idea of all the different beanies that's out there. Okay. Also, one cool thing, okay, that you can see, if you have a customer that's looking for something made in the US, because I would say 99% of everything is made outside of the US, but every now and then you'll find customers that want something from the US. All right. You have Cap America, so these, but the ones that I've used, see if I could find it here. Uh, it is, I don't, oh yeah, Bayside right here, Bayside here. All right, Bayside's a good brand. All right, I like it. All right, but as you see, starting at 1596. All right, so if you are going US, just be prepared to pay. Um, view spec sheet. Sometimes the spec sheet says where it's for. True American made. All right, so when you go to these description, it'll tell you where they're made. Okay, so for example, let's see, Colombia. Mm, all right. So I'm thinking you have to log in to see. It'll have a link down here where it's made. Okay. So sometimes you want to know exactly which country um, items are being made. Okay. You could check it from there too. All right. Cool. 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 Let me know if you have any questions on buying beanies. I get a lot of questions. Which beanies do I use? And from like the beginning. Okay. I always just say that I use these, the YP Yupoong Classics. All right. Now, one last thing about these beanies. So you have this type too. Okay. So these, the ones that I showed you here, the KC, those are 12 inches long and they cuff, right? You fold them, but then they also have these, the ones that you don't fold them. Okay. So these here, they're very popular. Okay, but sometimes customers might not like it because when you stitch on them, the stitching actually touches their forehead. Okay, because since you don't fold them, okay, the stitching, so that could sometimes become an issue. So if you do go with these shorter ones, these are the 8 inch, 8.5 right here. So it tells you the size, 8.5 inch. All right. If somebody does want that one, just remind them, say, hey, just want to give you a reminder that the stitches do touch your forehead. All right. Usually it's not a big deal. It's not a big problem, but I've had situation where people didn't like that. All right. Just as a FYI. All right. And then different places have different beanies. All right. So it's all about researching. And sometimes you're going to have to buy stuff just to test it out. All right. It's just kind of like the cost of business. All right. All right. Let me switch over here. Let me switch. All right. And then T-Town. Sanmar has super nice ones with fleece on the inside. Yeah. 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 I think they're $3 each. Yep. So you always want to have an account with SNS, Sanmar, and there's some other ones. Those are my two main ones for garments. All right. So yeah, the fleece one's very nice. Just make sure anytime you're trying on working with new garments, you always want to test stuff out. You want to do a sample run on yourself, right? Whether it's something for friends, family, or something for your business. All right. You want to test it out. And then that way, if you do recommend it to a customer, right, you already seen how to go about doing it. All right, and then good information here, Damien. You get a better selection and availability than UK distributor. All right, so we get better here in the States. Yeah, that's one thing. I really think we do have good selection here. The good thing about here in the US is that there's warehouses all around the US, and you can choose which warehouse you want it to be delivered from. All right. So, of course, you always want to choose the one that's closest to you because you're going to get it quicker. But sometimes, if you don't meet like the minimum requirement of shipping, you got to at least pack it up into one location and save on shipping like that. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure we do have more selection here. UK. All right. Good stuff to know. All right. And then Badge Underground. All right. What's the hardest learning curve for embroidery? All right. So there's three things you got to learn in embroidery. All right. There's three things. One thing you can get away with, kind of get away with, right? Digitizing, you could send it out. That's if you have a good digitizer, you could send it out. And if your digitizer is a rock star digitizer, you'll get something that's very good. All right. But you do want to learn the basics of digitizing. Okay. That's the hardest part about embroidery, I would say, is the digitizing. Okay. Because you never fully understand it. You're always learning stuff. And then the two other items about learning embroidery, hooping. Okay. Hooping is all about just doing it, right? Doing it, seeing what works. And then the actual embroidery. So your machine, learning how to do eye tests. All right. How to your thread path, learning your thread path, needles, and all that stuff. Anything that touches your equipment. All right. If you learn those three items, all right, then you're gonna master embroidery. All right. Once you understand those three items, embroidery becomes fun, and you're pretty much knocking out projects left and right. Right. But I would say the hardest part about embroidery is just understanding the digitizing, and you can actually learn digitizing by looking at your embroidery stitch out. Okay. So it's just a matter of time when you start learning all that. All right. Good morning, youngster. All right. All right. Let's see. Do you have a video on how to keep track of inventory or keeping track of taxes? I had I don't have one specifically on inventory or taxes. I have one just on the business side of embroidery. Okay. But I am going to put this one on my to-do list. Okay. I do want to get into more keeping track of your finance. So, finance as a whole, which would include inventory and your taxes. All right. So, that is a good topic. I am putting that one down as on the to-do list. All right. Let's go into the digitizing part. Okay, so step one on anything embroidery, we always start with the digitizing. All right, so I would say there's really like three rules. Okay, three rules. Let me pull this one up here. All right, so I digitized this embroidery here. All right, so I have three different ones. All right, this one here is like your common one. right? Something that you might see like on a polo shirt. So let me hide others. All right. So when you look at this, it has the, if you see the pull compensation, okay, 0.17. That's usually the software's default settings is 0.17. Most likely when your digitizer sends back your files back to you, most likely you're getting it back at a 0.17 because they already have taken into account the pool compensation. All right. All right. When we run this, okay, when we run this, all right. So right here I have it running with a underlay, just a regular run stitch. Or yeah, run stitch. Let me go a little slower. All right. There's a couple things that I want to show you here. All right. We start here, right? It's just a run stitch. You always want underlay. Okay. Now this would be for a regular file. Okay. But since we're working with beanies, right, we need more fluff underneath. So we need more of a base, or else our letters kind of get lost in the mix. All right. So all that fluff of the beanie, if we don't have extra foundation, then our, especially here, you see how it's curving right there, and then it's gonna curve right here too. Okay. The with script, I wanted to show this example with script because this is the situation where our lines get real thin at certain points. So if we're not taking it into account, so there's two things we're trying to take into account right here. It's the underlay and the pool compensation. Okay, because if we're not thick enough, and it's a common issue that you'll see on beanies and just text in general, is where um, the the text, it starts thinning out. All right, and when it thins out, it usually looks a little wonky. All right, like it's not gonna look straightened out. Right, so here when we have that curve, okay, we have that curve going on. That's where you kind of start losing your uh, your actual sand stitches. And I stitched these three out so we can see it. Right now I'm showing it to you on the software, but I already stitched these out and I want to show you what the difference is between these settings. All right. So beanies, a big setting, two big settings is your pull compensation and your underlay. Okay. So here, notice I only have a run stitch as an underlay and just your default pull compensation. All right. Now I go here to my second one and I make some adjustments. All right. Hide others. All right. So the adjustments I made here, I added pool compensation. So if you see this box here where I have a pool compensation, I changed it from a 0.17 millimeters to a 0.35. So I extended. Now, very important. Let me kind of see y'all right here. All right. The way I like to describe pool compensation in this situation, think of pool compensation like using a thicker marker. Let's say we're using embroidery, right? We're writing out embroidery with a specific marker, but somebody wants our text a little thicker. So in the normal writing world, you would find a thicker marker. So that's what pool compensation is. You're going to use a thicker marker, so it's going to be a little bit more dense. All right. So that's the way I like to think about when I'm talking about pool compensation. All right. So let me go back. So here, I increased my pool compensation to 0.35. So I went from 0.17 to 0.35. That's almost double, right? That's almost double my pool comp. And let me show you exactly where my pool comp, where that happens, right? So these needles, right? This line here is my actual line that I digitized, okay? And this needle is my pool comp. So it's extending it. Let me change to millimeters. All right. So here goes my 0.35. All right. This is how much I'm extending the needle a bit. So that's when we talk about pull compensation. This here is where I digitized it at or traced it at, but I want to make it a little bolder. I want to extend it a bit, right? Especially on beanies. Okay, I like to add an extra amount of pull comp because since it's a little thicker, right? It's gonna get lost if I don't, right? So that's what we talk about pull comp. All right, all right. Let's see. Let me know if you have any questions. Usually, pull compensation is kind of like tricky to think about. All right. There are certain times where you want to use it, and there's some certain times you don't want to use it. But for the most part, okay, for the most part, I like to use it for the beanies, 0.35. Okay. And another thing that I did that I changed it up, I ended underlay. So I went from center run and I added a zigzag also. Okay. So when it does that center run, when it comes back, it'll come back as a zigzag. So with that adjustment, let's push play. All right, so same thing. Okay, let me pause that real quick. So it did the center underlay and it added a zigzag coming back. Okay, that's just going to give it a little bit more base structure on the bottom. All right, so now these stitches, all right, these stitches kind of lay a little bit more easier. Okay, so it's adding all this. So by the time the final sand stitches come, okay, it has a nice base to land on. All right. All right, we'll see. We'll let this run for a bit just so you could kind of see. All right, let's say some good mornings. Good morning, William. All right. Good morning, Demps. Florida checking in. All right. And then youngsters, is this where using wash away? Okay, yes, we'll talk about wash away stabilizer. All right. I don't use wash away stabilizer. Okay. I hate cleaning it. That's really the reason. All right. I just hate cleaning it. I want to, after I finish stitching, I want to be done with it. Um, and I wasn't a big fan of it. But yes, we'll talk about, you actually do it when you're hooping. Now I'll tell you when we get into the hooping part, when you want to use the water soluble stabilizer. And then good morning, Psalms 91 Customs. All right, good morning from Georgia. Should we consider 60 weight versus 40 weight for certain details on designs like small letters and different needles? Yes, yes, yes. Um, I would say always try the 40 weight first. Okay, so let me keep your question up here. Always leave the 40 weight. I would always, what I like to do, I like to test it out with 40 weight first. If it looks too kind of too squashy, where you can't really see the details, then I'm gonna change to a 60. But sometimes you want to use the 40 just so it stands out on top of the beanie. But yeah, there are certain times where you do want to switch over to a 60. So if you see that your design is still looking uh, it's looking too dense, then you do want to thin it out. All right, good question right there. All right, good morning, Chicago. And then youngster, what style of stitching is best? Satin or flat stitching? Uh, so for text, I always like sand stitches for text. And then if you're gonna go real big, like on the backside of a jacket, and your text is gonna get big, okay, then you want to start going flat. All right. Actually, I do have something I want to bring up. All right. Now that you reminded me. Okay. So how do you know when to use satin? How do you know when to use uh, a fill stitch? All right. So I do have. All right. So you actually reminded me. of this that I want to put out. Okay. In everybody's software, in your manual, no matter what software you use, okay, in the back side of your manual, this is every manual has this when we're talking about text. It tells you your recommended sizes. So up here, you see your recommended sizes, your minimum. You're always kind of looking out for the minimum. What's the smallest that they recommend? Okay. So we're gonna work today with the Old English. Okay. I'm gonna make my design with Old English, and it's telling me I shouldn't go under 10 millimeters. All right. Now you could go under 10 millimeters. You just have to adjust certain parameters. All right, and certain settings. All right. So that's why it's called recommended sizes. Right. But they don't recommend going below 10 millimeters. And this is the big one here is the maximum size. Okay. You shouldn't go over. So if we're in inches, you shouldn't go over 2 inches. All right. So now once you go over 2 inches, now you might want to think about using a fill stitch or a flat stitch. All right. So that's kind of how we know there. All right. So good question there. All right. Good morning, Sidar. Good to have you. All right. And then classy and caffeinated. I use in Brilliance. You could search in Brilliance manual. I have the Brilliance manual. They're actually real good. Even though I don't use in Brilliance, I use the manual because the way it's written out is it's broken down very good. So uh, embroidery is um, pretty much the same for like a lot of the concepts are the same for all the different software. So you can learn a lot from different manuals. So I like learning from the I'm gonna see if later because I have it somewhere here. I'm gonna see if I post it in the description where you can find and Brilliance manual. But usually on their website, just put search manual and it'll pop up. All right. All right. Good morning, Bevy Jean. All right, looks really good with extra pull comp. The underlay was zigzag. I found out the hard way. Just switching from trucker hat to bucket hat. I need to redigitize. Yeah. Sometimes you just it's not. Sometimes all you got to do is adjust settings. All right. All right. So this is with the second. Let me unhide all. Okay. So here I adjusted on the gray embroidery. I adjusted the pull comp and I added a zigzag underlay. Okay. Now this might be all right. All right. You might be able to get away with this. All right. And we'll see in a bit because I already stitched these out so we can see the difference. Now here, okay, now here I made all my changes and my settings. I adjusted my settings specifically for beanies. All right. So as you can see, the obvious one, right? Oops. I have my knockdown stitch. All right. I like to work with knockdown stitch anytime I'm working with beanies. Okay. Um, and the reason why I like using a knockdown stitch because it eliminates the need to use a water soluble. Okay. So like what I said earlier that I I do not like using water soluble because I hate the cleanup at the end. And no matter how hard you clean, there's always a little piece of plastic that doesn't come off. All right. And then you have to explain to the customer, hey, this plastic comes off, right? It'll come off either when you wash it or just add water to it. But I don't want the customer to do any extra steps, right? Because they don't understand what the water soluble was there for. All right, even though it's for their benefit, they don't understand why there's plastic on their design. Okay, so by me adding this knockdown stitch, okay, eliminates the need. Right now, you could do a knockdown stitch and add water soluble, and it's just gonna look nicer, right? It's gonna look even better. All right. So it's all preference. If you want to clean the water soluble, if you're a fan of the water soluble, then right, it's only gonna make it look better, right? But sometimes there are designs where that plastic, it doesn't want to come off all the way through. All right. So I have the episode where we talked about knockdown stitches. All right. I think it was a real good one too. Okay, a real good training where we get into how to create your own knockdown stitch. Okay, you could buy templates, knockdown stitch, but usually you could create your own. I'm actually gonna put up. I'm gonna put up for a free download today. The template that I created. Okay, this one and another one that I'm about to show you. Okay, this one here. This is like a contour knockdown stitch. So it's forming the shape of my text. All right. So sometimes you either want a box, so a rectangle, or a square uh, knockdown stitch, or you want a contour one that kind of goes with this shape. Okay. And on the next one, okay, I'm showing you this one. On the next one, I'm gonna actually show you how I digitize my knockdown stitches. All right. Then here, okay, here. So let's analyze my letters now. Okay, so same thing. I have a center run with a zigzag. So I kept the underlay, but this was the big one here. All right, was full comp. I went up to a 40. Okay, so from 30, I started at 17. On my second round, I went 35, and then on this round, I went 40. Okay, so that's equivalent to using a thicker, like just think about it, right? That's kind of like using a thicker marker. Okay, that's how I think about when I think about pool compensation. I say, hey, if I wanted this text to look a little thicker, what would I do? Right? You would, in a normal paper type artwork, you would use a thicker marker. So that's kind of like how I see pool compensation. All right. Actually, let me show you real quick. All right. I'm going to copy this part here. I'm going to actually show you how I did that contour. All right. So let's change this color here to uh, red. All right. So anytime you want to create, all right, a clean outline here. All right. So we select it and we get a simple offset. Yeah, we could use a simple offset. All right. Spacing 1 millimeter. That's fine. That's just 1 millimeter around. Okay. So we put OK. And then you see it made a perfect, right? Perfect curve. All right. And then you could delete all these ones that's in the middle. All right. And if you don't want to be like this close, let me see how I did this one. Yeah, so this one I was all right. All right. Actually, what you can do, if you don't want to be that close, delete that. Let's do it again. All right. So I was 1 millimeter away, but what you can do, so again, you could put 6 millimeters. So kind of back up a bit. All right. Or that's kind of a little too far. You could probably go 4. All right. All right. Once you have this here, okay, this is the most important thing is just to have the outline. And then what I like to do, all right, let me hide it. Let me hide everything else and just focus on this area. Hide others. Okay, so we're just focusing here. All right, what? And just like I said, we did do that training on knockdown stitches. So we kind of get into more details of it. But for the most part, okay, a knockdown stitch really is a fill stitch with high density. All right, that's kind of how I see it. H, we could start on one side and end on the next one. All right, so what you do, spacing 6 millimeters, or you can even go 5. All right, That's just the spacing between our stitches. All right. Length 4. Yeah, you could either go 4.5. All right. And we could, there's this word trapunto. Okay. That just takes away these middle stitches, like these running stitches to connect each other. Trapunto puts everything on the sides. So you get this nice, clean looking side here. And then to put the other side, so this is one way. So these are my stitches going 45 degrees or 60 degrees. I think it's 60 degrees. But then you could put an underlay. Actually, you could do an underlay, or we could just copy and paste, duplicate this one, and then switch. So I have two on top of each other. Okay, I have two, same one. But here, all I do is switch the angles. Okay, H. So I switch it over to 120 degrees. All right, so that's how I get that nice looking net as a knockdown stitch. All right, and then you can control, right? If you want it, if you want more, if you want it more close or more closed or more spacing. Okay, so here you can see on the bottom it tells me how many stitches I have. Right, so on one side I have 330, on the other side 421. Okay, so let's say you want it's too many stitches for you, right? For some reason, it's too many stitches. You can open up these holes right here, right? 7 millimeters. Or if you want to make it more tighter, you could put 3 millimeters and make it smaller. All right. So you control, right? If you're controlling how much, so the more thicker your beanie is, the more knockdown stitch you have, right? And then let me show you. So let's go ahead. Let's unhide all and delete this. Unhide all. All right, let's delete this. And let me see my settings here. So here for the one that I used, okay, I used a spacing of 5 millimeters and my length 4. Okay. So once again, let's do a replay, hide others. Let's do a replay of my. All right, and here goes. So here I want to push from right to left. So that's me pushing my fabric over to the side. Okay. So I push everything to the side, and then I go and I do the same, but now I push it to the other side. Okay, so that kind of just flans out. It gives me a nice base. So my text, okay, my text has a nice flat base to rest on. All right, so while we're seeing this play, let me check out some questions. All right, youngsters, how do you pull that up for your fonts? Oh, okay. Oh, that's on the manual. Any manual that you have, you should have. You should be able to see all the fonts that your software has. So depending on what software you have. Hey, good morning, Joe. I need to tune in more. I have the program, just no time to learn digitizing. Yeah, it's very time consuming. Okay, very time consuming. Uh, Over the summer, right? Actually, yeah, but especially over the summer. So I'm always right testing stuff, but over this summer I really tested to the max because we're like in game time season right now. So yeah, it's just a lot of trial and error, testing stuff out, seeing what works, looking for the magic recipe, and then adjusting that magic recipe. All right, good to have you here. And then Jane, all right. So you saw when I kind of opened them up and closed them, right? Can you make them tight or close together? So you have control of how much underlay you have, okay? All right, and then barb. Yep, trapunto. All right, I like it. I like how it looks very clean right there. Okay, it just gives it clean. It's just attention to details. People don't see the underlay because it's black on black. People don't see it, but you see it, right? Other embroiderers see it, and it just shows kind of professionalism on that base. Okay, and then on by it. Wow, there, that looks good. Yep, yep. It looks clean. It looks professional. Okay. Uh, here, let's zoom in a bit, and then by thicker beanie. Yeah, that's what I mean. Fluffier, right? Fluffer. Right. And then Bevy Jean, would you also increase the closeness of the stitches if lettering is smaller? Yeah, yeah. So if any of your design is getting lost in the beanie, then you might have to. A possible solution might be to make your knockdown stitch a little tighter. And then Jane, so more trial and error. Yeah. I mean, yeah, but the thing with trial and error is when you finally find it, right? Like nobody could stop you, right? You're like unstoppable once you figure everything out, okay? And you don't have to figure everything out at the same time. It's just you're figuring out little certain things step by step, but once you got it, you got it, okay? All right. Now, let me show you. Let's go ahead and let me show you the difference. So here on the hide all, okay? So we could learn theory all day, right? But the best thing is to actually see the actual stitch outs. So I have them right here. Let me go ahead. Let me turn on this camera here. And let's check out how it really looks. Okay, let's see if we can actually tell a difference. So usually if you always see this like in the forums where you see people struggling, their font, their text. I think the biggest problem that with beanies, the biggest problem is where text it gets too thin. And when it gets too thin, now the lettering is not straight or doesn't have that perfect curve. Okay, so anytime a big solution, I think a quick solution to thin text, okay, to thin text or to something that's not looking sharp is to uh, look at your underlay and look at your pull comp. Okay, those are probably a quick fix there that you could probably take care of right there. All right, let me see. Let me get something flat right here. Mm, all right. So I am using this new light box that I have. So far, I like it. I like it very good because I could. All right, let me zoom in. All right, hold on. Might have to adjust this lighting. All right, let me see if you can see a good detail right here. All right, we are super zoomed in right here. All right. Yeah, because this is kind of like a 3 inch wide, 1 inch in height. Okay. So we're super zoomed in right here. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Let me just put some tape because this is curling up a bit. on the edges. Give me one sec. So the top side, the top one, that's the one that doesn't have any of the adjustment. It's just like your default pull comp. All right. I don't know if I'm too zoomed in. All right, so we can analyze that a bit. All right, so let's talk about this one. All right, perfect. All right, so I'm looking at it right here also. So the top one, okay. So the top one is we could first analyze our curves. All right, so on the B and the D, all right, you see how it kind of curves in. Um, it looks right. It looks like we're missing some, and that's really the beanie. Okay, that's really the beanie covering those lines. Okay, because the stitches are there. All right, the stitches are there. And then as we go down, okay, as we go down, okay, right now we're focusing on the B and the D, those curves on the B and the D. Okay, on the middle one, now we're seeing it a little better, and then on the bottom one, all right, you could see those curves. All right, you could see those curves actually full curves. We're not really losing any of the details. Okay, the letter E, we could analyze the letter E. Okay, so on the top side, right, it kind of looks a little jagged. Okay, and as we move down, our E kind of stands out a little bit better. Okay, pretty much all of our text, right? It looks very um, jagged on the top, right? It looks very thin. Doesn't really match the font. And as we go down, right? And then the bottom one, really what the bottom one has is that knockdown stitch, right? Has that knockdown stitch. So really all the text kind of stands out. All right, let me make this a little bigger. And then to answer this question, all right, this one definitely comes with it. When doing underlying, should you use the same? So you definitely want to use for your underlay. I mean, for your knockdown stitch, you definitely have to use the same color. And so here, since it's a black beanie, my knockdown stitch is black. Okay. Yeah, that is a must. That is a must. Unless your design is part, right? So, so if we move it to the side, right, you can see how that bottom embroidery, you can read it all the way through. So I'm just kind of like moving the angle a bit, moving the box a bit. All right. So it's little very subtle. Okay. It's very subtle, the changes that we made. Okay. But especially seeing it like here face to face, right? I could really see the difference right here. Okay. It looks very clean. Let's zoom in a bit. All right. So what's happening here? The stitches when you're here super zoomed in, okay, this top one, I can see the stitches good, but what's happening is the surrounding puff of the beanie, all that material is covering our thin lines. Okay, so the sand stitches are there. It's just they're being covered. All right. So when we see it here, right, these little gaps that we see here, okay, it's not gaps in the stitching. What it is it's the beanie covering the stitches, right? So it looks like gaps. And what I notice here is that our curve, okay, it's a little, it's not solid curve like, one stroke curve. It looks very like jagged, okay, and wobbly, okay. And then once we get here on the bottom, okay, bam, our curve just kind of stands out, sticks out, okay. All right, so that's a good one. You can't really see the knockdown stitch here. All right, I would really have to dim the color down. Let me see if I dim the color down. But since the knockdown stitch matches, see if I zoom in a bit. Yeah, you can't really see the knockdown stitch. But this bottom one looks very sharp, very bold. Okay. If you wanted to make it look thicker, then you can easily add pool comp. Okay. All right. So that's this one. All right. All right. Let's go ahead. Let me show you one other thing. All right. Let's see. All right. We're doing good with time. And then Jane, if you said it. What stabilizer for beanies? All right. We're gonna get into hooping right now. Okay. Let me just go over one more thing. But for hooping, stabilizer is cutaway. All right, but I'm gonna show you how to go about that. And then Bevy Jean. Oh, Gary. All right, Gary. Good morning. SNS has an external website that shows the quantity and sometimes the custom price. It also does not show that. All right. Get the link, but you need to have. All right. Yeah, yeah. You definitely need to get an account with SNS. All right. You definitely have to. SNS, Sandmar, those are like the must-have accounts right there. All right. Yeah. Wow. It looks good. I knew this, but to actually see the stitch out together, bottom letter look. All right. Yep. So I'm a firm believer that we got to see it, right? We can learn this all day on the software, but to actually see it, and then what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put this file, okay? Because right now when I'm seeing it on the camera, it looks good on camera. All right. Well, you can see the big difference on the camera, but when you see it in person, it's even more of a difference. Okay. It's like day and night when you see it in person. Okay, one just kind of stands out and looks very bold. Okay, and the other one's kind of lost in all that fluff. All right, so I am going to put this file here if you want to stitch it out and kind of see it for yourself. And what you can also do, right, you can just have this. So I have it here. I just taped it up right here. All right, but you could just keep this as a guide for yourself, right? So I have boxes and boxes of my samples. I just have them as guides so I could see this work. This it looks like this with this setting, and it looks like that with that setting. All right, all right, cool, cool. All right, let's go back to the software here. All right, I just want to show you one thing. Okay, one thing, and then we'll go in stitching out. All right, so I got this here. All right, let's hide my knockdown stitch. Hide. All right, so I got my text right here. All right, this is just keyboard text. Okay, so when we go keyboard text, let's say I go Romero, Romero. Look for our text. So we can go Old English. All right, one thing about text, when we're talking about text on beanies, you want to avoid anything that's very thin. Okay, even though we did have a thin text on this first example, right? You kind of saw the adjustments that I had to make. Okay, but for the most part, when you want beanies, you want something that's a little thick. You want to avoid scripts. If you're gonna add scripts, make sure you add pool compensation. Okay, height. Okay, we already showed you in the beginning, the Old English has to be above 13 millimeters. All right, but I want to go US. Um, we'll start at 0.75. Okay, that's going to change right now, but let me put that in here. Create text. Okay, bring this down a bit. All right, H. So we talked about text a couple weeks ago where we can adjust and make our text a little closer because you want to avoid cuts always with text. Okay, so here I just want to make my letters close. All right. Um, so here, once again, what I'm looking for is the biggest adjustment. The two biggest adjustment when working with beanies is my underlay. Okay, so we go to underlay. All right, we want, you could put an edge run, but I'm good with a center run. Zigzag's fine. Okay, you could put double zigzag. All right, but we should be all right here. And then put our knockdown stitch. Okay, here you can also make a knockdown stitch. Uh, let's say you don't want to do a contour knockdown stitch, you just want to put a rectangular one. Right, so it's the same concept. Right here, make this into a fill stitch. Okay, 5. You'll have like your special recipe that you'll use. Underlay. H. Then trampunto, right, to make it look clean. All right, so that's kind of how I created this one. All right, but I do want to get into the stitching part. So let's start that right here. Let me show you this one. Unhide all. Let's replay this. This is the one I'm going to stitch out right now. Unhide all. All right, so let's see. I have it set for 3.69. Actually, the total 3.75 wide. Okay, height. Okay, height 1 inch high. So this whole design. Okay, 3.75 by 1 inch. That's kind of like a sweet spot for beanies. All right. Let's see. Let's play this out. So same concept. Okay, same concept. My knockdown stitch here. I'm going from right to left. I'm pushing. What's happening here? Okay. What's really happening here is I'm pushing that fabric to the left. Okay. Then I'm doing the same thing, going the other way around. And I like doing it this way just so we don't really get any bunching up of any of the fabric down below. Okay, so I'm getting a nice clean, right? You see how it's crossing each other right here? Okay, perfectly here. Okay, bam. Now I have a nice platform to put my letters. Okay, and I'm just using the keyboard lettering. All right, so it's the same thing. I have the center run as an underlay, center run with a zigzag. Okay, it's just gonna do its thing. So I have 0 cuts since I kind of put the letters real close to each other. 0 cuts in between. All right. So, and then one last thing that I want to show you. Okay. Let's kind of, you always want to look for the thinnest part of your design. Okay. Anytime you're going to stitch something out, anytime you're digitizing, you want to know what's your smallest stitch, what is your biggest stitch. All right. Here, we're not really worried about any big giant stitches. Okay. But we do want to focus on these small ones. So as you can see, this part, right? These little parts of the letters. That's my smallest point. You just want to measure that, M to measure. All right, and we are about let's go millimeters. Okay, we are looking at 1.48, so about 1.5. So that's kind of like sweet spot, right? Sweet spot, you really don't want to go below 1.5 for a full sand stitch. Okay, so here we're kind of like at a very good sweet spot, right? So you know it should stitch out. Okay, now this is a situation where if we do go below 1.5, okay, then we might want to go with a smaller thread or a smaller needle. Okay, so maybe we might have to go with a 60 weight at this point here. Okay, just as a maybe. Once you start going real thin, you might have to start going thinner thread, thinner needles. All right, so what I want to do is start hooping. All right, because the digitizing is important, hooping is important, and the stitch out is important. So I do want to touch on the three triangles, the three rules, the three embroidery triangle rules. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let me turn on my camera right here. All right. Let me know if you have any questions on the digitizing. All right. And I am going to I am going to make a video today on how to hoop beanies. All right. It's gonna be a quick one. It's gonna be like a short video. All right. I'm gonna try to hoop it like in 20 seconds. All right. How to hoop a beanie in 20 seconds or less than 45 seconds, something. It's gonna be called something like that. All right. So look out for that. And right now, what we're gonna do it in slow motion. All right. So when you see the video later today or tomorrow, all right, you're gonna see like the quicker version. But right now, we're gonna slow it down and kind of go over the details. All right. So looks like I'm good here. All right. Appreciate that, youngster. Yep. I always forget to say this, but thank you for reminding me. Hit that like button. All right. Hit the like button. Especially if you're all about embroidery, right? I'm all about digitizing, hooping, and stitching. All right, that's like the main thing. You can't have one without the other. We could talk about the theory, we could talk about the software stuff all day, but if we're not stitching out, okay, we don't actually see the real proof of our stitch outs. All right, so that's the whole purpose of these Saturday morning classes is we want to go into the three areas of embroidery. All right. So here, right? So I have my brand new light box. Okay. I got it this week. Right. I'm testing it out. So far I like it. Okay. So as you can see, I have this big old hoop right here, the 4.2513 inside this light box. Okay. So that's just a reference to show you how big this box is. Okay. And then I'm able to bring in my camera from the top side. Okay, and I am going to do a review on this one. I'm going to do a photo shoot or a product shoot on this. Okay, but so far it's cool. I like it. All right, so let's go ahead. All right, so I have my different beanies right here. Okay, so we got red, pink. This one here, these are all, I like working with the 12-inch beanies. Okay, because when you cuff them up, right, you get a good area, right? You usually have about 2.5. It's the same kind of the same size as a hat. All right. So I think it's kind of like in the same area of design size wise. Okay. But one thing that I want to show you. Okay. So these here are the Yupoongs. Okay. The Yupoongs right here. These are my favorite ones. Good quality. Like what I recommend, okay, if you're looking for a brand or a specific type of beanie, buy different beanies. All right. Buy all the different brands that your vendor has and then test them out, see which ones you like. Okay. I wouldn't recommend going with the cheap ones because they're very flat and your stitching, it just doesn't look very clean and sharp. All right. This one here, this one's your Cap America. Hold on. Hold on. Let me fix this. Oh, that's fine. It's like the backdrop kind of peeled off a bit, but we're all right. All right. So we got this Cap America here. Okay. This is the one that's made in the US. Okay. One thing that you got to notice from brand to brand, they're made a little smaller. So these here, okay, instead of being a 12, it might be like 11 and a half inch. All right. Thick wise, dense wise, okay, almost the same. I would say it's kind of the same, but that's kind of like what you want to do is just kind of um, do your research and see which brand you like the most. All right, but let's go ahead. We'll work with the black right here. Okay, and got my cutaway right here. Okay, so I got this AllStitch, the C30 8x8. Okay, so this is the common one. So like earlier, what T Town had mentioned, right? He had said that it's a little short right here, which it's kind of like right on the tip of the magnets. All right. So it still holds a bit, okay, but if you just want it to be an extra little tight, you could just throw this tape right here, okay. If it like moves too much, all right. But for the most part, it has enough to hold it, okay. And one thing that we want to see, okay, so we always want to have our beanie up inside out, okay, inside out. This is the back side, okay. So beanies, a lot of people don't know, but it does have a back side. The tag is the back side, so just put it inside out, okay. So the tag is our back side, so we want to use this. And what I like to do, I like to give it just don't stretch it, just kind of give it a natural, right, a natural open. Then when you open it and bring it in, okay, you can bring this in a bit because it's gonna start shifting a bit. All right, just kind of give it a nice natural open. But before we start, I almost forgot. We gotta find the center point. Okay. So what I'm gonna do, let me just find. Oh, here it goes. You could either eyeball this. All right. After you make so many beanies, you could pretty much eyeball the center of a beanie. Okay. Or you can use your trusty ruler here. That kind of shows you your center points. Okay, you have it here. All right, so I know if you want to use this, all right, so you could see here 3.5, 3.5. We'll just lay down. You could either use a water soluble pen or I'm just using this piece of tape right here. All right, let's check this out. Bam, right here. It's my center point. All right, got that good. And let's just bring this in a bit. All right. And then I just hold it from here. All right. Now, what I like to do, all right, this is like something that I started doing recently. Okay. I'll pull it down a bit. And since I want to be closer to this top part of the beanie, okay, just kind of line it up. And I actually never hooped it while it's inside a light box. So kind of at a weird angle right here. Okay. This is my center right here. All right. Try to move it. Try center out. But this is a new thing that I like to do. All right. If you want to be 100% sure if your beanie's straight, okay, sometimes you could eyeball it. But if you want to be 100% sure, you could just pull it a bit. Okay. So it should match this here. Right here, you are 100% sure that you're straight. Let me see. Yep. So what it is, it's kind of like in this little gap right here to ensure that you're straight. All right. All right. I think we have a good angle right there. All right. If you have any questions, make sure you let me know. All right. Let me see. T-Town. Let me. I was working on pants and it just didn't hold. Not sure why they don't make it longer. Don't make sense to me. Yeah, you could try that. It's either two things. Either you could just put the tape like how I have it, or you could go uh either cut the cutaway so it could fit right there, or just buy these are the 9-inch cutaway. You could probably go these are the 8-inch cutaway. You could probably go with the 9-inch cutaway if you're doing a lot with these with this hoop, right? So either two ways to kind of do it, go around it. Either put tape, it's real easy, the tape part, or just buy a bigger cutaway. All right, cool, cool. All right, I think we're good with the questions there. Okay, now this is the line. This is your center line that you want to go by. You could just kind of match that with this line here. All right, and then this useful, I've been using this ruler forever, and it's always been my guide to getting all my stitches super straight. Okay, and just as a reminder, everything you see in our shop, like everything that I use, I'll link it. I always link it down in the description. Okay. I do not like to list anything that I don't use or anything I don't have in the shop. All right. So anything that I have listed is because it's something that I use and that I would recommend to somebody. So I don't list anything that I don't use. All right. Just as a FYI. All right. That's ready to go there. Okay. Looks like we're straight. This one here is the important part. Make sure, right, this tab is facing outward because we want to make sure our beanie goes in correctly. All right, once you're ready to go, bam, good snap. Okay, then you could see here. Oh, I moved my center line, but I'll just use that. All right, pull this out. Okay, and then we always double check. Okay, nice and flat. All right, and you can always, a big thing, you could always be conservative with your backing. Okay, even though I have it perfectly right all the way around. Okay, you could probably go half. You could probably use half. All right. But for the most part, if you're starting out, I would say do it like this, the correct way. But you will see there are going to be times where you're going to save on backing. Okay, but the more dense your design is, the more of a full backing you want to use. Okay, just kind of a heads up. All right. So always make sure that the tag is in the back. Okay, this is the front side. Now, one thing that we got to know is we got to flip. All right, you got to make sure you know how your design's going to look. So when I flip this in, okay, we want the design to be facing upward. So you could put an F to kind of remind you. All right, so this is the top side of, you'll see what I'm talking about right now when I put it. All right, let's go ahead. Let me switch cameras. I got the GoPro right here, ready to go. Give me one sec. All right, so that is the hooping part, right? So we talked about the digitizing. We talked about the hooping. And the hooping, once again, it's cutaway. I would not recommend tearaway. Okay, I do not recommend tearaway because your stitches begin to open up and start going into different direction if you do use tearaway. All right, let me switch over. Give me 1 sec. Let me see if it turns it on. All right, we're good. We're ready to go right here. All right, Mark, appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. All right. Then T-Town. I use a ruler, use it the same way every time so it lines up. All right, yep. All right, don't forget, everybody, hit that like. Let's remind YouTube that we are in the house. We are learning embroidery. All right. And always, if you ever have a question, okay, if you ever have a question what we're talking about, drop it down. Also, if you ever have recommendations, if you want to see something, okay, I got a lot of projects on the to-do list. Okay, one of my big projects and a big class that I'm preparing for, all right, highly recommended or highly requested is digitizing Greek letters, right? Applique. Okay, so that one's in the background being worked on. All right. All right. So, bam. Okay. Went ahead. Got it here. So here, anytime I'm using uh this 5.5, I always have it on the hoop C. Okay, I'll do a quick. Let me do a quick. All right. All right. So I already have it flipped. Okay. So let me just see if I could center it. Yep. You probably got a better angle than me because I have this camera right in front of the right in the center. All right. I think we're good. Yeah. Okay. All right. And put that. All right. Let me do one more. All right. So my colors, I have the black. Double check my colors. I have the black underlay, and then my letters, I'm gonna do it silver. All right, 789. All right, so that looks good. All right. I should be good on my bobbin. I didn't check it, but this here, 4,800 stitches. All right, so relatively small or low amount of stitches, but good for the size that it's at. So it's at a 3.75 wide by a 1 inch high. All right. Once we're ready to go. All right, let me see if you could see a good view of this knockdown. So it's going to do this knockdown stitch. So exactly like how we saw it on the replay. Okay, yeah, you do see I think you do see a good view. You could instantly see that knockdown being applied. And then Bevy Jean. Yes, that's what I meant. So the design, you know how you have to flip the design? It was already flipped on my. So when you said already flipped, you mean yes, that's right. Exactly. And then Marisa, have you ever appliqued a patch on a beanie and then embroidered? Yes. So one of my last videos, that's what it was called. How to applique on a beanie. Let me see what it's called. Um, How to, oh, okay. I put how to applicate a hat. All right. So it's the same concept. Same concept. But yeah, you could. Actually, I didn't put your question. So yeah, I could talk about that in a bit. So usually you want to applicate. That's actually a good point right there. Okay. Sometimes you want to applicate if your design is just getting lost in the mix and you've already tried everything possible to make it stand out and it still doesn't look sharp. Then you might want to applicate it. All right. All right, Siddharth, thank you for the Cash App. Okay, I just got that right now. Good looking out. All right, let me see if I can get you a better angle right here. Another thing, if you're getting a lot of loops, okay, usually a big common problem on beanies is a lot of looping. It's definitely your tension. So before running a big project, you definitely want to check your tension. Make sure. What I would recommend doing an eye test on a extra beanie. So always have an extra beanie available, and anything you're gonna work on, always do an eye test on that specific fabric. So yeah, so that thin line, that was our 1.5 millimeter stitch. But here you can see at this angle how it flanned it out. That knockdown stitch have made it nice and clean, like that square. And then Demetrius, I only have one cutaway, so it's only one cutaway on the. And what even gives it more structure, okay, is that knockdown stitch. So one cutaway is good. And then T-Town, you've been using tearaway. Sometimes you could get a if something's working for you and you haven't had any issues. All right. Usually, when to use tearaway versus cutaway, because sometimes you could get away with certain stuff, right? If you have thin, really the test is when you stretch it out. If your design kind of goes all over the place, then you know you should use cutaway. But if it doesn't, if your design still stays in place and you can get away with a tearaway, then you're good. Because sometimes you can break the rules. Okay, it's just if it works, then it works. So if you do notice that your design is kind of looking all wonky and all over the place, then just go with a cutaway. If not, just stay with a tearaway. Hey, good morning, Mary. All right. VL. All right. Question for beanies: does it make a difference if the design does not stitch out from the middle? That sound like hats. Um, I would say if your design is very dense, you want to go from middle out. Okay, but something like this, like text, like how I'm doing it right here. Okay, I'm going from left to right. You should be all right like this. Where you really want to do, you'll notice if you need to go center in or center out, is if your design starts bunching up, like your fabric starts bunching in with itself. Since we created this knockdown stitch, we have a good strong platform or base, so we should be all right going from left to right. And then Bevy Jean, this is a 3-ounce cutaway. Um, Medium cutaway. You should be all right with a medium cutaway. Yeah, actually, from medium on up, you should be all right. There should be no problem. Here, I'm using a white cutaway. What's red? What would be more ideal would be to match the color of your beanie, so or the closest color. So you would want to use a black cutaway. Okay, so but eventually you're gonna cut the cutaway to a smaller piece, so it's still not gonna be seen anyway. So it's all good. All right, so right now what I'm looking for, I'm just making sure that my details are looking sharp. I'm looking that I'm not getting any loops. Okay, if I am getting loops, then I can adjust. You can always adjust your tension knobs while your machine's running. Like you don't have to wait, restart your project. Okay, I've reset it or not reset it, but I've adjusted my tension like in the middle of a design. So if I see something that's looking a little off, okay, I might tighten up my tensions. But right here, they're looking, it's all looking good. I chose this font here just because for this example, because we have the thinner details. Okay, we have kind of curves and swirly stuff and straight lines. So we're kind of seeing the different type of scenarios that you could see. If you're doing anything straight, block letters, okay, it's very straightforward. Very straightforward. You really don't have any issue. And like how we saw in the first example with the one that said embroidery as an example, a lot of curves. That's where you really have a lot of the issues. Swirly lines, where you start losing some of that detail with the swirly lines. Okay, so the main information for today is two items that you always want to look out for when working on beanies. Okay, and that is your underlay. You want to have a strong underlay. You don't want to have too much where your underlay, because if you have too much, your underlay is going to start creeping from the bottom. So it's going to start spilling out, and now you can see the underlay coming out. Okay, so you want to find the happy medium. You want to find an area where it holds the base strong enough, but it's still being covered by your sand stitch. And then the second item that you want to look out for is your push pull compensation. All right. So we are about to be done right now. All right, take this out. All right, let me turn off the GoPro. All right, let's check this out. Let's zoom in right here. See, this camera that I got is real good on zooming in right here. All right, there, take it off. Okay, cleanup time. Let me grab my scissors. This is my all-around scissors right here. Best scissors ever made. All right, I'm waiting for these to like not work anymore, but they've been working forever. All right. When you're cutting cutaway, you don't want to use your very nice scissors, your embroidery scissors. All right. Just cut this right here. You want to be careful not to cut your beanie. Okay. What I usually just do is let the paper hang. and the fabric just kind of hang out from this bottom. That way you minimize cutting the fabric. All right. Check this out. Let me bring out my cardboard. So analyzing my thread. Okay, I can see here. Let me see if I show you. I actually have one little. Well, we'll see it afterward. But overall, looks super clean. Right, looks super clean. Right, that knockdown stitch, right, really makes these letters even stand out. All right, this is actually real good right here. All right, I do have one. Let me see if you can see it. Oh, let me dim these lights. On the E, top E, okay, I do have, if you can see, it's like hard to tell, right? You got to really zoom in, right? Somebody has to really zoom in. But I got a little loose, little tiny loose, right? I was hoping for one loose, right? So I can show you, right? The dab nab or whatever that's called. Let me grab that right here. All right, my favorite tool for these type of situations, because this stuff usually always happens. Usually with beanies, we usually allow for one or two. Let me zoom out a bit. We usually allow for one or two of these, but this is the dab nab, right? Probably one of the best thing ever invented. This needle. Once again, like everything we have in the shop, you can find it on our Amazon link. Okay. But what this is, you see this side, the needle? Okay. It's like jagged. So what it does is when you put in this, when you connect that tiny loose thread, okay, when you pull it through, okay, and if it's kind of hard to pull through, just have these linemen's pliers just to make life easy. All right. You don't have to sacrifice your finger and poke your finger. Just pull it out like that. All right. What it does is that jaggedness just brings that loose thread in. All right. Might have to get a little. Let me just get a little. Let me just zoom in right here. Kind of off camera, just so I could get a better view. Bam. All right. I don't think you could have seen that little loop on the camera, but I could see it from right here. All right. Cool. So right there, easy breezy. All right. We got that easy breezy right there. All right. Came out nice and clean. All right. So width 3.75, and then our text is 1 inch high. Right. So it's a good size. Right. It's gonna really stand out. Okay. Look at that. See. So you can really see that thin detail in the text. So when we measured it, that was 1.5 millimeters. So that's as thin as you're gonna get, and as you can see, it really stands out. Okay, it's not hiding. All right. So a big reason why we can see it, right? It's three reasons. The knockdown stitch really helps it, keeps all that fluff in, and our push pull Okay, and that underlay really helped it. All right, cool. So let's transition. All right, so I think this is a very, very, oops, let me see. Let me shift over. All right. Let me zoom out a bit, actually. All right, good to go. All right, so today we went over the digitizing. Okay, we talked about do's and don'ts, right? Mostly the do's, right? Yeah, that's what it's called. Snab nab it. Thank you, Barb. Yeah, I don't know why I call it the big nab. All right, all right. And then Demi- Demetrios should be black cutaway. Yep, but should be black cutaway. But once we cut it, right? Once we cut it, right? You can't even see the cutaway. So unless somebody takes it out here, right? This one's pretty big. If it's something big like this, like 3.75, definitely you want to go black. But it's not the end of the world because you can't really see it. Okay, so right, definitely if I'm selling this, okay, once we put it, okay, I'm using black. Okay, for right now, okay, for right now, let me just show you one thing. I don't have the black squares. Okay, I need to order those. But what we do, so that kind of helps us with making it fit on that. Okay, we just use the rolls and then cut them. Right, cut a bunch of ones. A little time consuming, but you can save. You save a little bit of money. You don't save anything big. But if you need to get specific size, so sometimes we need it bigger than the 8 inch, so we could size it up like that. But yeah, black cutaway, definitely. All right, Jesse. Yep, yep. Appreciate that. All right, Bevy Jean. Question on the back: do you trim your stitches? Mine always seem too long from the back. Usually I don't, but if I do, this one, right? We had two cuts, right? We had on the knockdown stitch, and here, it's not a big deal. You could, or you could just burn them with a lighter, and they kind of, because you don't. Sometimes you don't want to cut them too short because they might unravel. But if you burn them, they disappear. But they disappeared by kind of crunching in together, so it's more secure if you burn them in. All right. So, all right. So we are officially right beanie season. I know it's hot, especially on the West Coast. Right? There's wildfires all over the place. Temperature's hot. Nobody's thinking about beanies, but beanies, okay? Good thing about beanies, relatively small stitch count. Okay, the lower the stitch count, the faster you can knock out projects. All right. Ever since I kind of saw that concept of how many stitches a beanie slash hat slash polo has versus a big jacket back, okay, I kind of got an idea that it's quicker to do these projects and more profitable, right? Um, so definitely, if you are an embroiderer, somebody's going to ask you that they want beanies, guarantee. All right, it just comes with being an embroiderer. All right, so just be prepared. Make sure you do your research on what beanies do you like best. Okay, so I like the Yupoongs the best, but there are other ones. There are other vendors. Go out there and research. So that way, right? This is September. By October, you should already have your go-to beanies because somebody's gonna ask you what beanies do you recommend, and it's not always good to recommend the most cheapest. All right, I've tried that route, and the bad thing about that, the beanies, okay, they're very flat, they're not fluffy, and they just look cheap. All right, and you don't want to be that cheap shop, right? You always want to recommend the best for your customer. All right. And then one thing I forgot to talk about, thank you for reminding me, cat sporting hats. I noticed you didn't use any topping. Okay. All right. I was supposed to mention the topping when I was hooping. Okay. Usually you want to add that topping when you're hooping so it's nice and flat. underneath that hoop. Okay. I don't use toppings because I don't like cleaning it. All right. I know some people are big fans of it. I'm not a big fan because I don't like cleaning it afterwards. All right. I think, okay, with my experience, I think with the knockdown stitch, that's good enough. All right. So here with this text, more than good enough. If I put knockdown stitch here, I mean, if I put a topping here, where it kind of tends to get stuck and hard to clean. It eventually comes off, right? It's not there for life, but where it's kind of hard to clean is the little small areas here. All right. And I just the thing that I don't like about it is that you gotta wet it, right? You gotta clean it, wet it, and then you gotta wait for it to dry. And I'm all about stitching it, cleaning it up, bagging it, sending it out. All right. One time we had beanies kind of like drying all over the place. And I was like, okay, I don't want to do that again. So I think with the knockdown stitch, I'm good with that. Right, I'm good with that. If I need more details, maybe I might do a topping, but I'm not a big fan of topping. All right, the Gene, appreciate that. Funny thinking about beanies. Last Sunday it was 39 degrees. Oh wow, already 39. That's crazy. Great class. Thank you, Romero, for taking educational journey. All right, and then one announcement. Yeah, okay, okay. I do have an announcement, but let me just this one right here is a good one. Right? Yeah. So we have there is this is actually a very smart way to remove the water soluble because you're using heat and water. All right. So yes, this one right here, if you do use a water soluble topping, okay, using a steamer, okay, especially a commercial steamer, right? Definitely a better way to remove it. And then here, avoid half cardigan beanies. All needles better and much better if in fine gauge. Or if it is fine gauge. All needles. All right. Okay. Needles. Yeah. I'm good with ballpoint needles with beanies. That usually works for us. Okay. All right. The announcement that I had that I almost forgot. Um, we are going to have. Okay. We're going to have. So I was thinking the way to start the cheat sheets, okay, the PDFs and all that information, additional information on top of the classes, all right, just so we can have everything all in one location. All right. So the way I want to put that out is we're going to have a membership here on YouTube, okay? So YouTube made it very useful where we could have a membership here on YouTube, keep it all in-house within YouTube. And that way, anybody that's in our membership, okay, you're going to have access to all the information. So the PDFs, a lot of the free, even though we put out the free stitch outs, okay, there's going to be additional on top of that with the PDFs and all the info. All right. So I'm going to work on that this weekend, so this week, be on the lookout for all the information about being on the membership with the Romero Threads. All right. I'm very excited because I'm working behind the scenes, doing the PDFs, okay, because I'm all about keeping all the resources in one notebook. So if you ever encounter a situation, right, it's easy to access and reference information. All right. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And like always, we're working on projects. If you have any recommendations, okay, if you have any recommendations on specific projects, okay, I am putting a to-do list on all the videos, trying to knock them out and trying to be as informative as possible. Okay. We have about, I would say, 16 weeks till the end of the year. All right. We are doing these classes till the end of the year. All right. A big reason why, okay, we're going to stop at the end of the year doing the classes every Saturday morning because I am going to transition from here from Midwest over to San Diego. Okay. But during the first half of next year, okay, I'll be on the East Coast. Okay. So I'll be in Virginia. All right. So the Navy has me going all over the place. All right. Um, so I'll be on the East Coast. All right. So I have a lot of things in the back of my brain, kind of how to put out information. All right, doing classes. I definitely do want to do live classes next year. All right, so be on the lookout for that. All right, so a lot of good stuff coming up in the upcoming months slash weeks and all that good stuff. All right, so um, be on the lookout for the membership for YouTube. All right. A lot of good information. I have like folders and folders of info that I'm packing down into PDFs. All right. So that's going to be a lot of good things to look out for. All right. So if you got anything today, if you learned anything, at least one thing, I would appreciate for you to hit that like button, share it with all of our embroidery friends. All right. And let me know if you have any questions. And if you're on the live, you can leave your questions down below. Okay. And I'll put some of these stitches that we did today. I'll put them down on the download link. So if you want to follow along and kind of see for yourself, because sometimes it is good seeing it on the video, but it's like next level stuff when you actually see it in front of you. All right. All right. Thank you very much. I'll see you next week. Peace out, everybody.